they must have made so much money because they were generating like 30 meetings a month. We were paying $150 or $200 per booked meeting. And then as soon as we understood what they were doing, we supplemented what they were doing ourselves. I think at our peak, we were probably doing 40 meetings a month with one SDR and sending 1,000 emails a month. 75% open rates was the standard. If we went below that, something was wrong. Like, what's going on? And then I want to say the reply rates were on the order of 20 to 30%. 40 booked meetings to 1,000 prospects. Back then, I think it was very standard to use a 7-touch sequence with no calling, just email. For 1,000 people, 7 touches, 7,000 emails, and you get 40 on the other end of it.
Welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. I'm talking today with Rod Fuentes. So Rod is a founder and CEO of a company called Nubara. He founded Nubara actually after selling his previous company called ListenLoop. And so he co-founded ListenLoop as a B2B SaaS company, and he led it from initial product development all the way to the acquisition. And during that process, he used the well-known predictable revenue model, and it worked like a charm for him. However, after a while, he realized that the whole cold outreach game just wasn't what it used to be. It became more and more impossible by the minute to book meetings. And so after a while, and after realizing how hard that is, he started Nubara, which is a tool that allows you to tap into your warm network and then get referrals. So he's going to tell us more about it. Rob, welcome to the show, man.
Excited to be here. Big fan.
All right. Appreciate that. Did I do you justice with this intro?
You absolutely did. Yeah. ListenLoop was a really interesting company and product and a time when account-based marketing wasn't yet a thing. Where we started that journey, it's actually really interesting. We started as a feedback collection company. We were trying to compete at the time with Qualtrics and a few other kind of survey providing services because my co-founder was a sort of engineer's engineer, and he would hate when product managers would tell him to build this or that. And eventually they would build it and then no one would use it. And he'd get so frustrated, be like, why didn't you ask the users that they wanted this? So naively, we built this tool where you would capture feedback inside of the product as people were using it. You use this feature 10 times now, it's time to pop a little survey question related to that as a tooltip. And we learned that nobody wanted this at all. Like nobody cared, but there was a couple of marketers who were using it and they said, it would be really cool. Can you take the survey answer you got and put it into a retargeting ad? And we're like, that's crazy. Can we do that? And then we just went deep down the rabbit hole of the advertising technology stack. And we found that, yeah, we can do that. So then we ended up building this advertising for salespeople approach. All right, check this out. This is really crazy. The buyer would put our JavaScript tag on their website. And this is long before GDPR. This is like 2013.
I was just about to ask you.
This is 2013. This is early. You could do lots of really interesting stuff back then with cookies and a lot of data. Our clients were sending out mass emails, as you did back then. And then we would wrap the links with our listenloop.com/client user ID/ and then a specific user identifier. So when you would click any of my links, we would cookie you, we'd relate that back to the user, and then the salesperson would get an email notification saying, Stefan clicked on a link, okay? Mm-hmm. Then I would write you an email that would actually go back to our system, ListenLoop. That email would be turned into an ad, and it would retarget just you. Wow. So the idea was that, oh, you're gonna ignore my emails, no worries. Wow. I got you covered. So you were able to deliver the message as people were browsing the web. And it was interesting. What at the end of the day, that also didn't work out for a bunch of other reasons. Number one, it was like my friends and people called it creepy tech. And it was. We were putting how in LinkedIn you could see opportunities for you and it's got your face and an ad. I will say that I think we pioneered that concept. We were putting people's avatars in the retargeted ad as it delivered just for them. And it was fascinating and creepy all at the same time. Along the way, we learned that you needed to focus on the account as opposed to the individual.
Mhm.
And that's when this whole account-based marketing thing started brewing. It was like 2015, 2016. And then that's when things took off, where we were just sending out all the cold email that we were talking about.
Real quick, if you're a sales leader or you know someone who's looking for support when it comes to cold outreach, cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn outreach, we build SDR and BDR teams for companies or complement their existing teams with top talent, remote SDRs and BDRs that are exceptional in outreach skills. So if you'd like to get in touch, just visit sdrhire.com and book a call with our team. All right, back to the show. Did the product evolve from that simple one feature type of thing into something that kind of, did you just use that to retarget everybody in one account? And so you basically did account-based advertising based on activities of a couple of people, right?
That's what we were doing, account-based advertising. It was initially retargeting on the basis of people coming to the site, cooking them, and then finding them on the open web. The reason that didn't work, and you can ask all the other B2B retargeting companies that ended up rising and falling in the space, is that the retargeting space works really well for consumer because there are so many consumers.
Yeah.
In the B2B world, most B2B SaaS companies in that time frame were lucky if they were getting 10,000 visitors a month, 20,000 visitors a month.
Yeah.
And so there isn't a big enough pool of people to retarget such that the vendor can make money on the ad revenue or a software product that's tied to the influence that you can exert over 10,000 visitors a month.
Yeah.
And so that was the big aha where we realized, oh, what the marketer really wants to do is project out and reach accounts that they haven't been able to attract to their website. That was the key that led to the evolution of the product, where we then used a different set of data that was purchasable on the third-party marketplaces that were available back then. This is like BlueKai, Lotame, all these data providers, right? The amount of data that was available on people was insane, right? We could say, okay, now place an ad only on CIOs at airline companies. And that would be one micro campaign. We would just deliver ads to that combination of data sets that would allow the ad to be delivered.
Doesn't LinkedIn do something like that when it comes
Yes.
to like advertising? And
Absolutely.
I think they have an insane monopoly on that because they're probably the only vendor that has that data specifically. I know that Facebook actually tried something and I don't think it was successful.
Yeah, LinkedIn has a lock on that because they have something very unique. They have first party data, right? I have reported that I am a founder of Nubara. In our product, the main difference was LinkedIn has a limited audience, and at least back then, now they're like 1 billion members, right? But LinkedIn wasn't what it was back then. And not all of your users are checking it constantly. What about all the other time you spend on the internet when you're on the open web, browsing articles, anywhere, checking the weather, etc.? At that time, LinkedIn has since been able to extend their reach through partnerships with publishers to accomplish the audience extension feature that is very, I think, loved and hated. Essentially, you can take the targeting profile that you have in LinkedIn and extend it out to the open web. That wasn't possible before. And that's the function that we were serving.
Interesting. So two things. What's with the company now? Obviously, you guys were acquired. I also want to hear that story as well. But is the concept alive in any shape or form?
That concept continues, and it makes up a part of the ABM tech stack that most modern marketers would use. They would do their inbound campaigns. They would do the outbound campaigns of content syndication. They would do outbound advertising campaigns. And so there are a variety of vendors in the space that focus on that world. And it would be Integrate, the company that acquired us. It would be Demandbase. Once upon a time, Triblio was in the space. I think they've bowed out. But there are vendors in the space who essentially fulfill that role still.
I see. Yeah. Conceptually, I think it's pretty clear what you guys were doing. And obviously you were doing a good thing because you got acquired. Maybe you can just briefly reflect on how that looked like and what it was. When was that?
The negotiations and everything happened 2018, and then the actual acquisition went through, I want to say January 2019. And it was a wild ride. What can we say about it other than right place, right time? What's really interesting, I'll tell you this. After the fact, when I left the acquirer to start another company, I thought I was hot shit. I thought I knew what to do and how to do it. And I think I had a reckoning that It's sometimes better to be lucky than it is to be good. You got to be good enough, but luck plays a factor for sure. And here's the luck. We were at the Adobe Marketing Summit, which was back then Marketo Nation. And we were one of many booths in the gigantic Moscone Hall in San Francisco where Dreamforce is held. And one of Integrate's, I think it was the chief product officer or the VP of product, came by our booth, and we had set up a booth to get a bunch of attention because we had the cheapest booth. We had set up beer pong, and you would shoot beer pong into a cup that we had established, and that would win you the free shirt instead of giving them all away. And Vardit and Richard, were the VP of product and the chief product officer, came by, and very nonchalantly, they're like, "Oh, we should partner or buy you guys." And it was delivered so offhand and so casually that I was like, yeah, cool. Nice to meet you. We had a good chat and I liked them. And that was it. We left it at that. We had some follow-up conversations a month or two later, and we didn't think anything of it. I then mentioned that conversation to a friend. They were like, oh, they might be interested. Like, you should start talking to other people in the space just to see if there's interest from others. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. I think we want to keep going the way we're doing it. We really like our team, the size we are, and the growth. And so
How big were you at the time?
We were 10 or 11 people at the time. We told our advisors, investors, and they're like, no, yeah, talk to a couple of people just to see. I talked to some folks, and before I knew it, it just happened overnight. Suddenly they were like, oh, you want to be acquired? Oh, okay, let's have that conversation. It turned into 2 or 3 different, essentially M&A type folks flying us out, meeting the teams, going through the process. And then it was about a 6 or 8 month negotiation to get it all done. It was probably the most stressful time of my life. Physical symptoms of stress, but it was a journey. It was an adventure, and it was beautiful, man. It was incredible. It was life-changing outcome for us, and happy to try again in this crazy world.
That's so precious to hear, man. I'm so happy for you guys.
Thank you.
You told me that you use the predictable revenue model. For folks who might not be familiar with the concept, maybe you can walk us through. I'm pretty sure the audience will quickly understand what we're talking about. But you were pretty successful with it. That was your main lead generation or new business acquisition model, right?
Absolutely. So it was, paint the picture, right? It's 2012, 2013. I was a former patent litigation attorney, and I didn't know shit about shit. I didn't know anything about business, sales, marketing. When you take on the founder role, you essentially take on the obligation and the commitment to learn whatever it is you don't know. So I started consuming all the books that were available in the space. One of those books was Aaron Ross's Predictable Revenue. Throughout the book, he essentially describes the process by which he was able to scale this particular channel for Salesforce, as I think he was a VP of sales, or he was mid to high level management at Salesforce. And he goes on to describe tactically, and I think that's what was really special about the book. So many sales books are sort of theory. He was very tactical. Here is the email that I send: email 1, email 2, email 3. It's a whole sequence. And this was before sales automation had really come around. And it was early marketing automation days. Teams like his and ours were using like janky versions of Marketo and HubSpot to accomplish this role, where what we see now, of course, is Apollo and Outreach and all these different tools. What we were doing was using the ESPs, the kind of MailChimps, the HubSpots, the Marketos, taking their templates, finding out ways of how to like hack the product to strip away all the HTML possible and send these janky plain text emails to effectuate the predictable revenue model. Without the whole stop automatically if someone replies. You have to be watching it constantly. And realistically, although I had read the book, I didn't really have the experience in how to make that operational. And so somewhere along the way, one of our investors advisors introduced us to Eric Boggs. He has an agency called RevBoss. He's had it since back then. And we hired them as an agency to do the work. It was really special because I ended up bonding with Eric. I said, look, I want you to do the work, and we're hiring you as an agency. But more than anything, I want you to teach me. I want you to teach me what you're doing.
Smart.
Not because I want to replace you necessarily and strip you out, because I want to take the process and make it my own and add my own, whatever it may be. And that's what ended up happening. They showed us the ropes and how they were doing it. And how like You talk to agencies. Agencies come in lots of different shapes and sizes. What is universally true, however, of all different agencies is that they believe they can get the job done. In some cases, they can or won't, or they do. In this case, I have never felt such a strong, holy crap, you so over delivered on my expectations. I was freaking blown away, right? And it was a technique and a method that was very unproven at the time, to the extent that I don't believe any agency does this anymore, but we were paying on a CPA basis.
Oh,
Like,
seriously?
yeah, we were paying maybe $150 or $200 per booked meeting, with him having, I think, uncapped upside and a protected downside. So we did pay a minimum retainer per month.
Uh-huh.
And then every meeting that was booked was going towards that minimum retainer. And then anything above a certain number was all upside for them.
Yeah.
They must have made so much money because they were generating initially 20 meetings a month, 30. As soon as we understood what they were doing, we supplemented what they were doing ourselves. And I think at our peak, we were probably doing, I don't know, let's say 40 meetings a month with one SDR.
Yeah.
And sending 1,000 emails a month.
Were you just doing emails?
Those 40 meetings a month were just from the email channel.
Yeah.
There were other channels, of course, inbound, retargeting, our own technology, conferences, etc. But it's wild that one person, 1,000 emails, could generate 40 meetings a month.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Those were the golden days.
Exactly. I know of agencies that perform similar feats even to this day and even more. It's just a numbers game these days. But this is so impressive because I'm a bit younger compared to when the predictable revenue model was introduced. When I started being a BDR, it was intuitive. It was, of course you do that. And outreach was already a player, and Lemlist was just starting out. And it was like that second wave of, hey, personalization, hey, stopping the mail merge and using outreach has just been proclaimed $1 billion company or something like that. I missed that initial wave, and it seems like it was making strides for companies like yours. It's impressive to hear that story. It's not common for outbound sales agencies to have that kind of a model, or at least I can assume it was like $1,000 and then $200 per meeting or something like that. It works. There are some companies, but the infrastructure that you have to pay for these days just to send emails, it's, in of itself, it's $500 or something, whatever. Right. But it's super impressive. So happy that you told me that story. Yeah. Really enjoyed it. And so how big did you grow that? Did you only grow with one SDR?
I think we ended up having maybe 3 SDRs and then 2 account executives plus myself doing kind of founder-led sales. And the big differentiator we had in the market was that we were self-serve. The SDR and AE function for us was more of a tip of the spear, brand awareness, get the name out, get in front of people, play. But most of our business was inbound at some point. After about a 12-month mark, it became an inbound game. It became conferences. It became that kind of style of company. Yeah, it was wildly efficient with having such a small team.
How did you feel as a founder doing founder-led sales?
Dude, I love it. I would say that I'm an electrical engineer and then I became a patent lawyer.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, I realized about myself is that I like telling stories. That's where I live. That's what I love. To me, sales is part storytelling, and then it's also part lawyer work. That feels really natural to me. The discovery part to me just feels like taking a deposition. It's asking good questions. It's understanding. It's listening very carefully. And then it's the engineer side of me, which is solution oriented. Ooh, you have this problem. I could see how we could solve it. That's really interesting. Let's bring those pieces together. I've always enjoyed that function as a founder.
I like that those different parts of your personality actually give you that sales edge that a lot of us have, where we're just very pushy with our products, and you're more solution driven, solution oriented. Interesting. You're deposing them and then you're suggesting solutions where you work with them, opposed to working in your own best interest. Anyway, sales has this vibe around it that not everybody's perceived that nicely as it seems like you have been.
Just to be clear, I have gotten my fair share of you emails in reply to.
Oh, I can imagine.
That's just par for the course.
Of course. Just out of curiosity, what reply rates are we talking about back then? Because I want to compare it with today.
You know what? I'll have to dig it up to get real numbers, but I'll give you what I feel like feeling directional numbers.
Right.
Because of course I'm talking about a time that was like 10 years ago, 11
Yeah,
years ago.
true.
But I at some point did an analysis because to the point we were talking about earlier, when I started a new company in 2022 and really started trying to go to market using the old playbook, when I fired up the Apollo again and did the old things I used to do, and then send out 1,000 emails and it's,
Crickets.
0.9% reply rate?
Mm.
And then half of those are out of office or garbage replies? That's weird. Let me try something different. And you go through this FUD cycle in your head of, is it the messaging? Is it the position? Is it the prospect? Is it deliverability? I ended up taking a really deep dive and trying to remember and see if I could find data around it to try to do a before and after analysis. It's somewhere on my LinkedIn, so I'll have to dig it up. I want to say that we were generating like 75% open rates was
Okay.
the standard. If we went below that, something was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? Let's pull the flag and figure it out. And then I want to say the reply rates were on the order of 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The volume I remember was 40 booked meetings to 1,000 prospects. Now, the number of emails, of course, depended on the sequence that we were using.
Sure.
Back then, it was very standard to use a 7-touch sequence with no calling, just email. You figure 1,000 people, 7 touches, 7,000 emails, and you get 40 on the other end of it. Of course, your mileage may vary. Our value prop was, I think, compelling, et cetera, et cetera. We were, I would say, touching a prospect that was not over mind, but a hot prospect. It was the marketing manager, the VP of marketing, the CMO. They've always been the recipients of a lot of sales touches. And so there was a time when we experimented and did an approach and targeted product managers, because remember, this was initially our product was related to the feedback survey and product stuff. So we did have a couple of sequences that went out to product managers. At that time, product managers were not being sold to very much. The reply rate, man, the fact that they even got an email from an external vendor was mind blowing to them.
Wow.
And they genuinely engaged. And we're like, sure, I'd love to talk. Let's have a conversation. Oh, I don't remember what the reply rate was, but it was like perhaps double the marketer.
That's so insane. I'm just comparing in my mind. Like,
I know.
what I'm seeing these days, it's not even comparable. Although I would say that because at some point when I started and when I became, let's say, good, I had fairly good results. 10, 20, 25 sometimes percent reply rates, 70, 80% open rates. And what I used to observe was people were not aware that those were realistic numbers for cold outbound because they were going off of newsletter and email marketing KPIs where it was like 30, 40% was like amazing and let's go with it. And as soon as everybody became aware that you can actually have 80% open rates with cold emails, they started cracking down on cold emails. And today we've got, and that's probably what led to Nubara as well. Google is really hard on cold emails. Outlook is even worse, but Outlook is Microsoft, so it's terrible by default. It's really hard doing cold emails these days. Totally possible, totally doable. There's a bunch of tools that we're using these days. But did you first have the idea for Nubara and then realize how shitty it was to do outbound? Was it vice versa? How did that happen?
It was the other way around. So when we came back out of our kind of soft retirement,
by the way, sorry, I have to ask you. So did you write out the whole the whole period? What's it called? The period after
the earnout?
Earnout, exactly. Did you write it out?
Yeah, wrote it out. Had a lot of fun. Worked with great people and integrated our technology into theirs. Watched our technology generate them millions and millions of dollars, and it was like a little bittersweet. A little bit like it could have been us, but you know what? They to their credit, they had access to a client base that we did not have access to. Their clients were Microsoft and Oracle and massive enterprise companies. That just wasn't our DNA to sell that. So it was really interesting. We wrote out the earnout, and then I ended up leaving first, and my co-founder stuck around for a bit. I started exploring what's next. Did a palate cleanser to do something totally wild and different. I have been a long-term speculator holder in crypto, and so was like, let's see what's going on in this space. We went down that rabbit hole, and it's super interesting technology, really interesting. Learned rather quickly within a year, I'd say, that it's very interesting technology. But at the time that we came in was summer of 2022. And I don't know if you're a crypto guy or not, but right around then, if you'll remember, Three Arrows Capital and FTX imploded, and it became an instant bear market overnight. And so the product, we built 3 products in the space, put them into the market, and it was crickets. There's no one, there were no users left after the implosions. As we were grokking and grieving over that period of time, OpenAI released their APIs. I remember we were at ETH Denver in 2023, and OpenAI released their APIs while we were there. And we were just somber and walking the town and going to events being like, damn, there's no one. This is a ghost town. Like, it's this conference, it feels, ugh. And we just pulled out our laptops and started playing with the APIs. And we're just like, man, there's some crazy stuff that's possible here. And so we hypothesized everything looks like a nail to a hammer. We were ad tech guys. And so we're like, well, imagine what you could do with this technology as an ad tech play. And so we ended up building an ad server where a publisher, let's say like vibe.com or your favorite, wherever you get your news or wherever, adds a JavaScript tag to the site. The tag, because it lives on the site, reads the article when you load the page. We take that article, we pair it with an advertiser, we generate a new paragraph that is a product placement, and we inject it back in to the original article in a way that flows naturally from the copy. And so we were thinking this would be a fantastic way to fight banner blindness, because that is a severe problem in the open web for advertisers. By the time you read the paragraph and realize it's an ad, the impression has been delivered.
Exactly.
And so we built this out, and that's what we started going to market with on a B2B playbook. So we went to market with that. I got this, Sandeep. Let's dust off the old playbook. And that's when I started doing the Apollo sequences again to publishers, et cetera, only to find out that so many sales teams, and ad tech is a very crowded space, but many sales teams, because it's a crowded space, had scorched and burned every publisher in the world, touched them 1,000 times this year. And the publishers, rightfully so, extremely jaded. This was 2023, so we didn't have some of the more recent lockdowns on deliverability that we were just talking about, but it was still turn off your link tracking, turn off your open tracking, maybe. And those kind of games are starting to pop up. That's when I started comparing a lot of the data I was collecting versus the data I was remembering from the ListenLoop days. And I told Sandeep, I remember a conversation we had where I was like, dude, this channel is dead or dying, or I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. And there was a lot of that FUD around the hell's going on. Like, this used to work. And so what ended up happening? The only way to get any kind of predictable lead gen from this process was to use the network. So I tapped advisors, investors, friends, family, like anybody that I can get on LinkedIn. I play that game where you go on LinkedIn and you find your 500 plus connections. You click that, you put in some keywords, and you find 15, 20 people that you would want to meet from that one person. Then you ask them, do you know John? I don't know John. I don't really remember where we met. Yeah. Do you know Amy, the person number 2 out of 15? No, I don't know Amy. And then by the time I was done, we had a chat thread where I'm basically asking, do you know so-and-so? It got to the point where I was just like, hey, do you know any of these 20 people? I understand that you may not know some, but if 1 or 2, I'd love to meet them. And inevitably what I clocked was about a 1 in 20, 1 in 10 sometimes, actual connection rate. You're nodding your head. You've done this process before. Your audience probably has too. It's a lot of damn work. But when you have no other channel, what can you do? When you're going from 0 to 1 as a founder, you have no other channel because there isn't inbound yet. You don't have a micro brand. There's nothing coming to you. It's all out. And so this is what you have to do. It's crazy to think that the amount of time and effort required to research the connections of each of your people to find out that maybe they know 1 in 20, then you got to ask them to do more work. And then they got to field the response and follow up if they don't reply and beg them. And so what you end up having is a really sprawling process around, how do I just get you to introduce me to someone that you actually know?
That's right.
We did that. We did all that stuff. And it worked to a point in terms of the depth and breadth of your network. And so it works for me in ad tech because I'd spent time in the ad tech space, but not on the supply side, not on publisher side. I spent my time on the demand side of ad tech, which is a different, just like a different buyer, different persona. I had some inroads, but not like an endless Rolodex. And so that's where the idea for Nubara came. Like, how do we get the value of warm introduction and try to remove as much of the friction as possible that I was going through to achieve that result, right? And then secondarily, how do we not have to ask, do you know so-and-so? How do we make it so that we know if you know the prospect that I want to meet? That was what we thought was really special. We went down the path. Initially, it was called Intro Hub. And we had this, again, hammers, nails. I think we still had some of that blockchain crypto mentality. And our first version was a credit-based system. The idea being that I am a seller or business development person. I want to connect into this network. And when I do, if I give someone an introduction to one of my contacts, I earn a credit. And that credit is one that I could then use to meet someone through another member in the network.
Got it.
That was the initial germ of an idea.
Did it not work?
That did not work. That did not work. And I'll tell you why. What's really interesting for any sellers who listen to this show and are one-day founders, it's fascinating the difference between customer discovery and then the moment your product hits the actual pavement or the rubber hits the road. I interviewed, I think, 113 sellers of different types, from SDRs, SDR managers, AEs, founder sellers, et cetera, to understand, hey, is this product, does it have legs? Is this a real pain point? Yes, it's a real pain point. It's a real problem. Here's our kind of solution. Okay, interesting. They gave us their top 3 objections, and those were the key features that we had to build in order to overcome the objections. And everyone was ready, signed up, ready to go. Amazingly, it turns out that no one can predict as a user how you are actually going to behave, because the hardest thing to solve for is changing user behavior. That is by far the hardest thing to do. And so you can imagine, will you do something? A human is very terrible at predicting what they will do. They can only tell you what they have done with certainty, right? And so despite all these interviews and giving us the necessary confidence and conviction to move forward, the credit-based system had too much friction. It requires too much effort for a user to even take that action, not because it's not easy to do, but because they're not accustomed to doing it. Yeah. What are we accustomed to doing as SDRs, sellers? We have a specific roster and checklist of activities that we want to get through every week.
That's right.
And do you have a lot of extra time to try new stuff? Not really. You're usually overwhelmed with making calls, sending emails, researching a prospect, all those different things. And so asking someone to adopt a new thing, nearly impossible. And so that's what we learned from that first release we had. I think that was in June, maybe about 5 months ago. There were 8 introductions brokered through the platform back then because I was out there twisting people's arms. You said you were going to use the product. I forget how many introduction requests happened. And then from the introduction request, the person had to accept. And then so 8 intros happened. And then we licked our wounds and realized, okay, so how do we solve this problem? What we came to the realization was what we need is automation. Yeah. We need to make this as seamless as possible. That was the second version we released in August, a few months after that. It just took off, like 65 introductions in a month compared to 8 in 2 months with a very small set of users who were opted into this network and this automation. However, we made an omelet, but we broke a lot of eggs. It was painful. It was painful because what you gain with automation, you lose in control and oversight, right, as a user. And candidly, my build in public moment was, I'll tell you two. One was accidentally going viral, and not in a good way. I'll tell you that story. And then the other one was automation is good, but we should have known this, right? In the desire to solve the problem, we went forward with a solution that had the potential and the risk of upsetting some minority of users. And we erred on our estimation of that risk and how much it would annoy the users. And so the problem really comes down to put it into more concrete terms. If you are a member of this network and I'm a member of this network and we are bringing our contacts into this network, and I ask for an introduction to John Smith, who's connected through Stefan, you might be working on a deal with John Smith. And now the system has requested an introduction, and your inbox, from your email inbox, it would say, hey, John, Rod would like to meet you. Rod is doing blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Would you like to meet him? And of course you'd be pissed. You'd be like, man, why? I'm working a deal here. And so it's very clear that as we build version 3, you need oversight, you need control as a user to prevent these kind of things. Yeah. We ended up building a feature that allows us to infer your competitors so that you don't automatically make introductions on behalf of a potentially or somewhat competitive member, right? These are the lessons that you learn along the way that get you to build, hopefully, what is the right product.
Exactly. The early days, of course, screw-ups happen, and you don't really care. Of course you do, but you know that over a time span, it's not going to matter because John and the other guy, they're going to forget and you're going to learn. I really appreciate you for sharing what the actual process looks like and how you felt the pain and how you solved it. And what is the growth lever right now? It's obviously the growth lever is the platform itself. I think it has a certain level of virality built in. But how are you acquiring users right now? Are you leveraging cold emails at all?
Yes, great point. I am a #1 Jedi Master proponent of cold email still.
Okay.
Here's why. My current hypothesis is that our value proposition, which is a platform that brokers warm introductions for business development purposes, is a stronger value proposition in the absence of cold email working.
I like that.
Okay. Our value proposition gets stronger as cold email gets harder and harder to do. If that is true, then I need to prove to myself, the team, and our investors that is in fact happening at a greater rate. And so I am out there doing every possible thing to prove to myself that cold email works. Because if it does, it's undercutting our hypothesis, and I need to confront that reality and solve for that in some way.
I like the critical way of thinking and really gauging whether your product is actually good or not. And that's what's been moving around my mind this whole time, is because if I was an SDR and my emails are going to spam, obviously there are some solutions, and I don't know, my caller ID is being flagged as spam, whatever, I'm not hitting my target, I might be prompted to try a product like this, especially if I see, oh, there's another SDR using it. But honestly, I'm struggling to see this being part of an SDR's tool stack, or I struggle seeing a VP of sales or an SDR manager or a sales ops person buying this for their teams, saying, all right, so this is going to be like 30% of your meetings, or 40 or 100. I more see founder-led sales using something like this, but maybe you can tell me, how are you guys thinking about that right now?
I think that's a really good question. And the real answer is, I don't know the answer to that question yet. The hypothesis that I have is that at least of the BDR managers that I've spoken with, the pain is real, as you have identified. Yeah. The desire to potentially try something new is real. So then what we're talking about is whether or not the product can deliver the value to generate X% of your meeting quota per month. If you think about it this way, what the tool does today is, as a SDR, I connect and I have my contacts on there now, right? Imagine we have 1,000 other members in the product. Right now, there are 70 something members in the product. 70 something members in the product translates into 15,000 contacts that are genuinely reachable people through members in the platform. Okay. Imagine now we have 1,000 SDRs or 1,000 members of the network. I anticipate we're going to have something like over 1 million contacts that people actually genuinely can reach. In that scenario, there is enough network density that I think we could feed a team a steady flow of meetings every month that are opt-in, that are high intent, because you only get notified of a meeting happening when the introduction occurs. Right. And so what I anticipate is that the system today, when we connect our networks to it, what it does is it goes out and once a day in the free plan that we have, one a day will request an introduction to your target ICP through one of any of our members. And currently our meeting introduction request to meeting rate is 15%. So if we do 30 requests for you per month, you should get 2 meetings out of it.
Wow. Okay.
If your typical SDR today has a quota of, I've heard anywhere between 8 to 12 is a common average quota per month.
Exactly.
If we're helping you book 2 of those meetings for free, practically automated, delivered to your email, hey, Stefan, meet John Smith, I think there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of value, and it could be monetized in some way.
I think that you were 100% right. What I also think is going to happen is you don't need an SDR for that, honestly. Or rather, the SDR doesn't need that, because the SDR is there to book a meeting and potentially qualify. If you do the ICP setting beforehand properly, you can just forward that meeting to an account executive because he knows that's a qualified meeting. We'll see what that's going to look like. To your point, I think that once you have the critical mass, it's going to make all the difference in the world, especially if you can like continuously book a couple of meetings a month for somebody on a free plan. Like, we can talk about delivering value for free. For example, Adam Robinson, what he's doing, you must be familiar with him. And you guys actually, he is now playing in that space where you used to be, which is
oh man, that's a space I know. And exactly, visitor identification.
Honestly, this is the reason why I wanted to chat with you. You're not biased. You're not from the sales world. You're a founder. You don't care whether cold email or cold calling works or it doesn't work. You just want to.
I wish it worked. I wish it did.
You're growing your company. And you make a prediction. You're a little bit biased, especially because you're creating a new channel. But can you give a prediction of what outbound sales or lead generation traditionally as we know it from that predictable revenue model, like how will it transform and what will it look like in the future?
I think what we're seeing is the pendulum is always swinging. And what I think is happening is the 2010s were a hard pendulum swing that was coming from post-internet boom, .com bust, people out in the streets selling technology door to door. I remember stories about that, and conferences and events. And it swung the other way to this scalable, automation driven. The macroeconomic environment was such that was what the market wanted, like growth. And then we got drunk on that champagne. And the pendulum now is swinging the other way. And so it's not to say that automation is wrong, but the reality is that the market, I think at this point, deeply values relationships, trust, and human authenticity.
Yeah.
And those 3 things are very difficult to convey in cold anything, cold email, cold calling, anything. The only exception I have experienced is IRL, in-person conversations. You can do that cold in certain circumstances. You are both opting in at a conference or an event to meet new people. We can have a quick chat and get a feel real fast about, do I like this person's energy, what they're about? Okay, cool. I let my guard down. Now we can have a real conversation. That's very hard to do in cold anything. And so what we're going to pendulum back to is a world where we have a lot more in person, because that's very valuable, meetups, events, conferences, etc., and more trust-based, relationship-based selling, which is, like you said, I am biased. That's what Nubara is about, right? Relationship-led selling. And everyone has to leverage that. And so I think that's what's going to happen. Cold everything is going to continue declining in terms of its efficacy, right? And its efficiency. It still can work, like you have said, and I have said in my LinkedIn as well. Like cold email is not dead. It's just not as good as it used to be. It's not as effective as it used to be.
Yep.
You could still make it work. If you are a deliverability expert or partner with one, if you've got a huge persona data set of people you can run through, and you have a high enough value product that you're selling, the math of those unit economics can still work in your favor. But I can also tell you, because I lived it, that is just a shadow of what it used to be. Because back in the day, anybody with any idea could cold email a couple thousand people fairly easily and test whether or not they should commit their lives to working on this idea. Because that's how fast the iteration cycle was. I have an idea, I email a bunch of people, I ask them and do discovery. Do they buy? They did. Let's build a product. Let's raise money. Let's sell more. We already have a channel. Those days are gone, right? Those days are gone. Now, if you want to start something, now you need a network, you need trust, you need relationships. If you don't have those, then you need to place a very long-term bet that you will get those somehow. And that's what the go-to-market motion is, I think, for the next couple of years. And you know what? If we're in it long enough, the pendulum will swing back again. I'm sure of it.
Oof, I really love this. It drives the point home. And again, it's very useful. I don't usually have people on who have experienced the world before AI, world before, or at least not in the sense that you did with the results that you've made. And so super insightful. Rod, where can people find you and where can people sign up for a Nubara?
Nubara is trynubara.com, TRYNUBARA.com. And there's a sign up button there. It's free. Get us to 1,000 users. Come join us. We're a big, happy family. Me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Rodrigo Fuentes, and my DMs are open. Love having conversations with everyone. That's my thing.
Awesome. No, you literally, for everybody listening, Rod reached out to me and he made a hell of an intro of himself and wrote a nice cold email. And we actually quickly became friends, internet friends, whatever you want to call it. I'm so happy that you came on board. We definitely should have a part 2. I can't wait for this episode to air. There's going to be a lot of clips that I can clip from this episode as well, because you shared so many nuggets. I'll talk to you very soon. And for everybody else, keep being awesome.